Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wharton Tech Toks, where we host forward-looking tech discussions with industry leaders. And today, I am joined by Leon Zhang, who is the co-founder and CEO of BetterBasket, as well as a Wharton Tech Toks podcast alumnus. So thanks so much, Leon, for joining us today.
Of course. Thank you for having me. My name is Leon, proud member of both the Wharton class of 2024 and a former Tech Talk podcast host.
Yeah, I'm so glad that we got connected, and now you are a YC founder of BetterBasket. Do you want to just jump in and tell us a little bit about yourself and what BetterBasket does?
Sure. So before starting BetterBasket, I was at Wharton. I left halfway through to start the company. Before Wharton, I worked in fixed income at PIMCO, where I managed multi-asset portfolios to guard against inflation, which is funny because now what we help grocers do is react against inflation. At the time, there was no inflation from 2017 to maybe 2020. So I got bored of a slow-moving industry and decided to go into what many people thought was the exact opposite at Uber. While I was at Uber Eats, I helped to launch grocery delivery, as well as onboard grocers onto e-commerce for the first time. And it was there where I learned about a lot of things that we're working on now at BetterBasket. One of my biggest projects at Uber was to launch real grocery stores in Taiwan and Japan. It was the most fun I've had outside of launching BetterBaskets. But it was just complete chaos inside of a grocery store. I mean, you've been to a grocery store, you've seen people walk in, walk out, things flying off the shelf, but the back room of a grocery store is even crazier. You have supplies like coming in overnight. Sometimes you have like 5 different suppliers for avocados. They come in, the costs are all different. And the people that you need to like load the shelves are not coming in, and you can manage these workflows. What we found out is to increase profit, increase revenue, the easiest thing you could do is change the prices. That's easier said than done because in the era we're living in, with costs changing so much, prices changing so much, you change the wrong price, you're in the news for price gouging on something as sensitive as like eggs. So what you really need to do is understand the data. And so that intersection of like the macro in terms of inflation and cost changes are expertise and data, and then the main knowledge of grocery made us start BetterBasket, where we're now helping 4 of the top 100 grocers in North America with completely automating price changes intelligently.
Amazing. That's really helpful context. I did want to ask, because I did see a previous podcast episode that you did, and you talked about like targeting some mid-market grocers and even like ethnic groceries. Is that still like a market you're looking into, and how does pricing maybe help them as a company?
Yeah, so we're working with double the amount of large grocers that we are since a year ago. And we're still in the mid-market independent sector. So what's really important for those grocers, like maybe half of grocery store chains misprice or misexecute on their promotions. Maybe they set the wrong price on the promotion. Maybe they wanted to change a price, but couldn't put it in store. At the same time, these grocery chains, it's crazy if you like are inside a grocery store, they'll spend weeks planning ads ahead of time. And they'll have teams of people spending all their days just putting price changes based off of things like competitor prices, cost changes, and other factors that are coming in. And so how we really help these independent grocers, and ethnic is also an area that we're doing really well in, is that they don't have the analytical heft to both combine all their data sources into one and make kind of analytical decisions at scale. At the same time, you're talking about these independent grocers. A lot of them are already very strong in certain areas. Like we mentioned ethnic, and then in maybe every state in the US, there's like a very local, strong grocer. We're talking about 150 stores or 50 to 150 stores. And so it makes a lot of sense to onboard onto a system and to do the prep to think about how I should price zip code by zip code, block by block against competitors in my area. Ethnic is a specific area within this where it's really hard to automate your price comparisons when you look at a grocery store and how they price There's certain items that are margin drivers, and there's certain items they know you and I are looking at because it impacts the price perception. And like the items in like a 99 Match or an H Mart are just so significantly different from a Kroger, where it takes a different level of data enrichment and analysis to get them to their targets of margin and revenue gain.
So I'm curious on for those smaller stores, where do you pull the data to help them make those decisions? I'm kind of assuming, but I could be wrong, that they might not have a lot of that data already. So like, where are you getting that to help them make better pricing decisions?
What's fascinating is that all the data is out there. We think of ourselves as like a universal product recognition database to understand how products are linked across their competitors as well as their own stores. And so what they're making decisions off of is what the cost is, what a competitor store is, and the implied elasticity of an item. And so actually to get to what they need to make these decisions, they have all the data that they need. One piece is the internal data, which is collected through sales information from point of sale systems. Unfortunately, it's usually lying behind an IT wall, and it's not completely integrated. They might have a store like in Embarcadero, where we are right now, and sure, they have the overall like grocery system that you can pull data from. But maybe this Embarcadero store has like a local manager who is striking some deals, I'm making this up, with like a local oyster shucker on Embarcadero. This will happen many times over decades of a grocery store's history. And so you'll have wide varieties of files you have to completely integrate, not to mention the fact that cost and sales and pricing information is completely separate. Now that's the internal data. And so we do a lot of work in the data plumbing to integrate these to give them a full view of shopping behaviors and pricing. And then there's external data. I mentioned that we kind of started after COVID and we worked at Uber Eats during COVID. This is not only like a tailwind in terms of grocers becoming more sensitive, or people becoming more sensitive to prices and price changes becoming more volatile, but grocers became more digital as well. E-commerce was something that they had to onboard onto. What that means is actually all product information is now online, and just as it's available for consumers, it's available to us too. But I've described how messy internal data is. External data is so much more messy. Fortunately, the same work that we've done for internal data can be applied to external data, and that's why we call it a product relational database. Think of it as a map where I can understand what the price down the street, how that can affect prices in my stores.
Okay, that's a really great explanation, and it definitely weaves in macroeconomics, maybe your previous roles at PIMCO, and also like the long history of these grocery stores. So very complex. All right, so let's dig deeper into the story of BetterBasket. Can you tell me how the idea came about while you were at Uber, and maybe how working as the strategic initiatives lead kind of impacted how you lead the company now?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about what I worked at while at Uber and how like pricing was the lever that impacted margins and revenues the most for the least amount of lift. We always knew we wanted to do something more analytical for grocery chains. We were fascinated by the vast amounts of data that we could collect through grocery sales. And we knew that there was a better way to do things, a better way than what we saw grocery chains doing, even better way than what we were doing at Uber, which was passing around spreadsheets. It had the core essence of what we wanted to do, but still it wasn't a good, coherent system. And so Vagelis and I, my co-founder, we worked on this while at Uber, and while I was at business school, we decided to explore ideas within grocery. We didn't know we wanted to do pricing yet, but during this time, this was maybe around 2023, we would talk to grocery chains, whoever we could get. It wasn't easy to get in front of these folks, but again, what we heard is that they were having trouble keeping up with cost changes, and not only cost changes for themselves, since they operate on usually what's called cost plus pricing, which is I get something in for $1, I stack on a 30% margin. they were struggling with keeping up with competition because, as all these cost changes come in, they have to make a decision. How much of this cost change am I going to pass on to competitors and pass on to customers? Usually with the customer, you're walking around, you have a lot of decisions to make, and it's usually between a grocery store and its close competitors. And so this is the way that grocery stores would make decisions. That made us realize that we needed a better solution because what they were describing what they were using price scraping, it's nothing new. But what AI could really help us do is create this map of item to item, because otherwise you're dealing with massive amounts of data formats, different item names. There's no way a human could do this, even though some grocery chains actually do stick human labor on top of it. There's no way for a VLOOKUP or any other format to do this well, and needs a language model to thoroughly understand your different text formats to create this product relationship database. And so that's how we got our first traction. We've since moved on to different pieces of the pricing puzzle, including enforcing pricing rules and price elasticity modeling.
Did that, when you talked to grocers early on, was that a lot of like sales, cold calling? What was that process like?
Yeah, they say like early stage companies, it's partly product discovery and it's partly sales. And that actually happened to us in the reverse. Sometimes like you get what you weren't looking for. We were looking for, to learn more about the grocery industry. And actually that's how one of our first customers, and it's now our biggest customer, came to us. We were just interviewing someone who is in the Wharton Executive Education Program, trying to learn from insights. This was around November of 2023. And he was the first person we reached out to after we got into YC, and then became our longest standing customer. I think the way, if you're interviewing someone and learning about their problems, it gives a more clear view. They try less to please you or try to direct you in any way. They're just describing their problems to you.
Yeah.
And if you can understand your problems, that's the best way to do sales, because now I can solve one of your problems. I'm not just asking for your time or for your money.
That's a really good tip, is just being curious about the customer and not going at it from a sales perspective.
Yeah.
Even though you weren't actually selling anything at the time, but like it was good key learning.
Yeah. We were hoping to get the sale eventually, but coming at it from a more neutral perspective let us understand the need a little bit more clearly.
In terms of lessons learned at Uber, and were there any things that you took away from it, things that you wanted to keep when you're building BetterBasket, like company culture-wise, or things you maybe made sure you didn't want to have when you start your own company?
We'll start from the positive side, which is, I guess, two things. The first is that like something has to make it happen. I think what we did at Uber, we stood up like 20 grocery stores in Asia. And at the time during COVID, there were all of these other like dark store companies opening up that was starting to pose a threat. And we would just go through like months and months of like investigating them and understanding their business models. But one day, I think it was my boss's boss just decided like, we are going to have to go and do this thing. At the time, there were still a lot of questions, like, is Uber like a real estate company? Do we want to handle supply chain? But he decided, like, given everything that was going on, we need to just go out and do this, and you're going to figure this out. And so we went to Taiwan, and there was a local team there that did a lot of most of the heavy lifting as well. But we figured out the real estate. We found out where the cheapest places, the bang for the buck was. We onboarded some folks to help with the supply chain, but we got really deep into both the pricing and the logistics. And we figured these things out. So when I say like someone has to do these things, like everything we see is like someone went out one day and decided, I'm going to learn about all of these things, and it's certainly possible. And I'm going to, have the courage to build this thing up. And I think that's one thing I think we want to keep in our company culture. Just anyone can come up with an idea and run with it if
Yeah.
there's enough of an impact. The second thing was that we were able to stand these stores up and get the traction while at Uber. There needs to be some like force coming behind you. For us, that was COVID and people like ordering more delivery. Well, they kind of had to. Otherwise, it would be very hard to stand up. It would be very hard to have the consumer demand to keep expanding. For us, with these grocery chains, to get like for the top 100 U.S. grocers to work with us, we're a relatively new company, right? These are old school merchants. They really have to have a pressing need. And for us, it's inflation, it's increasing digitization of these merchants. It's like the unrelenting competitive pressure that's only ramping up day by day.
And then I wanted to ask about a little bit about how you, or I guess tips and advice on finding the right co-founder. And then maybe you can talk a little bit about how you separate like ownership of what you do versus your CTO.
Yeah, I think it's it's hard to say, but I would say it has to be if you're starting a company, we want this to be like a decades long, if not more, journey. And so it has to be someone that you get along with, but not so well where you always agree on everything. I've learned a lot from my co-founder, and I think complementary skill sets is an important thing, but also agreeing on the broad vision, but then having different points of views has been really important, I think, for the success of our company and our relationship as well. I think that how we divide our responsibilities is like I'm primarily in charge of the business. He's primarily in charge of the technology, but we certainly overlap at times, and we have become more open over time because we're just a small company to each other's perspectives on different things. I think my co-founder is a fantastic negotiator. I didn't do so well in the negotiations class. And so I frequently ask for his input on these kinds of things. On the flip side, I love working with data. He does as well, but I'd like to have some input on that end of the business as well.
Amazing. And then maybe one last question on the entrepreneurship journey is like, what's been the most surprising thing about being a founder?
I think it's just that it never gets easier, but it is just as fun. I think that you start to really enjoy the challenges. I joke that like getting into YC was the easiest part of this because it was. I think that as we go through each milestone, like raising our first funding round, getting our first grocer on board, getting our first large U.S. grocer on board. After each step, we thought the problem is solved now. We are now on easy streets. But because you're building a new company and maybe you're building a new category of business, you're always having to come across obstacles that no one has really figured out yet. And that's what makes it both so fun, but at the same time, why it's always challenging.
Mm-hmm. I guess maybe I lied. One more question is, what advice would you have for people who want to start their own company?
Yeah. I used to say just do it, but I think that that's not useful because if you would have done it, then you would have done it already. But I think that like when I think back, why did I start my company when I did? It's just that we started to question a lot of the assumptions of why this company would not work. Some of these assumptions are like, of course, we were told that grocers are really good at pricing, or that grocers would not accept technology, or even so, like grocers would not accept you, even if you put a good proposition in front of them. I think that, in business school, a lot of times it's easy to accept status quo, not just in business school, and like big corporate as well. This is the way things are. I need to tweak what I do according to the structures that are in place. But I think the way I've started thinking about some things is that the status quo exists for a reason. it might not be a good reason. And then we started thinking about like, who told us that grocery stores are good at pricing? Oh, it's consultants and like industry experts. What are their incentives? Well, they sell services to these grocery stores. Of course, they want us to know that, think that grocery stores are good at it. And we started like talking to the grocery stores, and yeah, like that myth got debunked. But then you started thinking about like, whose incentive is it to tell you that the grocers won't accept you or your product, or that it's like a sales-led kind of field. It's probably the same people that are the salespeople, the same people making a living off of these kinds of things, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But if you're trying to start a company or trying to make some sort of change, you will have to challenge the status quo in some way. And it's always easier if the status quo there's like kind of an adverse reason or like a not reasonable reason that the status quo exists. And there's plenty of those. And so that, I think, is what a lot of the folks that I know that are trying to start companies, they struggle with because they think, oh, there's like an incubator in this place. I can't do this anymore. Or this is the way things should be now. Like I can't make any change in this field.
That's a really good insight, questioning the status quo. That's extremely valuable for us listeners who are maybe starting their own company or maybe afraid to. So great. All right. Now, we kind of touched on a little bit about your Wharton journey, NYC, but let's really understand the timeline of things from when you began BetterBasket and Wharton, and then at what point did you want to really go all in on your company?
Yeah, I think Vigalis and I started thinking about this idea in the summer between my first and my second year. And it really started taking shape probably my first semester of my second year. So this is the end of 2023. I think I left where we really started to get traction as we signed up for this convention, which we were told like this is where we meet customers. We signed up for this convention. So I got on a plane after my operations strategy class. We had an MVP ready. And we went to Vegas and we got our first two customers. It was just like folks we sat across from through like a meetup application. And it's never happened to us since, but in those 10 minutes, the guy across from us at the time our pitch was still extremely rough, and it probably wasn't clear to anyone else like what we were doing. But for this person, it was really clear. He just told us like, this is exactly what we need. And from there we were off and running. So that was our first customer, which was a 65-store grocery chain in Puerto Rico. This was around November of 2023. Maybe like 2 weeks from then, we got into YC. We had an interview. We got into YC. I finished up my first semester, my first semester of my second year. And then we came to California to start the program.
So what was that decision process like for you to take a leave of absence at Wharton, knowing you're one semester away from graduating? Like, that's got to be a big decision, but what were the factors there?
Yeah, I never had a doubt. Part of it is the startup itself. For like a sector like grocery, you need some tailwind behind you. This industry has been the same for decades, and they're not a fast-growing industry like technology or AI, but they do fine for themselves. So you need some structural change. For us, it's inflation, it's COVID, it's supply chain shocks, and now things like the tariffs are making grocers finally think about things that are not just business as usual. Like the thing that we fight against most is apathy, and finally our core customer is not apathetic at all about the thing that we're providing. Part of this was, of course, YC. You think about startups, that was like, I've always wanted to do a startup. That was a community I really wanted to be a part of. And the other thing is like the Wharton community. I'm on a leave of absence. It's always something that you can kind of participate in. We're in the Wharton SF campus. Yep. I still keep in touch with folks, whether it's professors who you may need research help from, or of course my friends in the program.
Yeah, I would definitely second that the Wharton community is still really strong. I mean, Leon LinkedIn messaged me about a guest who wanted to be on our podcast. And since you were part of the Wharton Tech Toks podcast, you still have that link. And I'm so glad you get to be here and check out the Wharton SF campus. So I also wanted to ask, like, throughout the year and a half that you were on campus, did you participate any classes or accelerators or anything that entrepreneurial that Wharton had to offer to help build BetterBasket?
Yeah,
Or even classes that you took away from?
yeah. I think three things really helped. The venture labs, the accelerator program we were a part of with Jeffrey Babin. It was helpful to get connected with different resources at the venture lab. The second thing was just like having the community around while you're exploring different ideas. You have both the time to like do your own investigation. For us, it was like talking to different grocery stores and chains while having like professors who've been in this industry for a long time and know the ins and outs. And that's like the last thing that we keep in contact with, like folks at the school. We just had dinner with Professor Sergey Nedison, who teaches innovation. And he's been helpful through this entire journey, whether it's like getting us started through some of his connections, or even now, like when we get a grocer who's interested in using state-of-the-art techniques to change their price elasticity modeling, he knows the right way to point us to the researchers in like a very win-win-win situation to work on these kinds of problems.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then kind of shifting over to YC, like what do you think makes YC so special? How did that help, accelerate the company, and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, I think it's two things, and it's like on a group level and an individual level. On a group level, this might be the only forum where this makes sense, but when we got into YC, it reminded me a lot of when I got into Wharton. When I got into Wharton, they told me you should all live around Center City. That will maximize interactions with your classmates. YC was the same. They told us you should live in Dogpatch or Potrero Hill. And during the batch, we would constantly like bump into people, whether it was at Phil's or like just walking along the streets, and we would know what other people were working on, mostly what they were struggling on. It's very helpful that like even in this community of what should be like very high potential, the highest potential startups, there's still people struggling with all sorts of different things, just like we were. Yeah, it's just slightly different. We would bump into people that are like coding at nights, and I think the members of the audience would know like what Wharton students do at night. But it would still be like very important that you are like interacting with people within the group. The other thing is the individual. I think the most important person during YC is your partner, someone who funds you and believes in you. Ours is Nikolai Desange. Definitely the most underrated partner in YC. There's others who are more kind of vocal, but he was the founder of Algolia, which is a public billion-dollar company. They have both like seen so many startups go through ups and downs, and they know a lot about your specific company. And I think what we value most is that they're not afraid to give their opinion on your company, but they have kind of the humility to say that this is your company. You should do what you think is right. Sometimes we've taken his advice. Sometimes, we've gone against his advice. But he is always willing to give his just very clear opinion about where we're going.
Besides him as a figure who's really important in shaping decisions that you make, can you talk a bit about your team at BetterBasket and how you hired?
Yeah, hiring is the most important thing we do. It's one of those things where it's like you wouldn't expect to be challenging, but is actually very challenging. You have to have the right mix of like someone who's very smart, but also willing to be scrappy, but at the same time wants to build things that will last for a long time. Those almost sound like conflicting traits. Uh, and it's funny because you're a startup. This is someone who can likely get a job at like a Google or a Facebook, but they want to work for your company. And so we have a team of around 5 at BetterBasket now. We hire based off of, there needs to be a baseline level of technical competency that must be met. You need to know how to deliver the product. But for us, actually delivering the product is not enough because it's not like at a big company, like at an Uber, your job, however big your job is or however challenging it is, it's very well defined. We might have a problem and we might have like a customer where they have something that they don't even really know what they need. They are just like a middle level employee who wants to get their job done, but doesn't know what tools are at their disposal. Especially for customers like ours, we have customers that are quite technical and good with tools. At the same time, there are folks that are more experienced and are used to a certain way of doing things. And so when they're faced with something new, it completely throws them out of their routine. And so for us, paired with the level of technical competency is also a genuine interest in helping these folks solve their problem, a genuine interest in understanding a grocer's problem, a retailer's problem, and pairing that with their technical comments to build a product. We always say like a grocer almost has speaks a different language, and it actually is true. Because they don't understand what we can do for them, but we also don't understand what limitations are in place for the grocery chain.
So then of the five, like what are each of their roles?
Yeah. There's my co-founder and I, that's two. And like we mentioned, I'm more on the business side. My co-founder is the leader of the technical side. We have two full stack engineers working on engineering as well as data science. And we have a designer as well, which is really important especially because of the problem that I've described. These are folks that are like not super savvy with technology. At the same time, we have just mountains of data. I can expose as much of it to them as they'd like. But how do I understand their problem, which is like a lack of time and a lack of awareness of what's going on in it from a data perspective, and mold it with like what they're trying to achieve, which is revenue and margin gains.
I'm curious on that you mentioned design. I'm curious on like how you go about with testing and iterating. Are you working really closely with your grocers and like putting ideas in front of them, or like how do you release different versions?
Yeah, it's absolutely critical. We do have like weekly meetings with all of our customers, but oftentimes it's more important actually for us to know what's going on in their day to day than for us to put different versions in front of them. Putting different versions in front of them is good. We need to do that. But if you put different versions in front of them and you're just hearing their feedback, that's almost like shooting in the dark sometimes. So what we do is like whenever we get a customer, we fly out to exactly where they are. That's why we were in Philadelphia last week and we just sit in their conference and we sit there for a week and we learn the ins and outs. We learn that Rebecca pushes the prices. She spends Wednesday pushing the prices and she spends all day because the different flavors of Gatorade are not all aggregated in one item. And so she has to go through all this data. We know what Kevin does with the Philadelphia soda tax and why that's important for the way data is structured and how they think about pricing. And those kinds of insights that we glean only by being on site allow us to design the product and understand their needs, design their product in a way that allows them to like use it more seamlessly, fits in with their daily routine. Not maybe fit in, but like allows them to use it without disturbing too much of their day to day.
All right, now we're going to go into our rapid fire questions. And the first one I had for you is, did you ever know already that you wanted to be a founder, or did it just, the opportunity arose at the right time?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I went through most of life thinking I will never want to do this. And the reason is because my family is a group of entrepreneurs. And so I would see what they would have to go through like day in and day out and be like, I will never want to do this. And so that was like the active thought in my head. But when I look back at the things that I've worked on, I think it's pretty clear that I always wanted to start something of my own. While I was at PIMCO, one of the reasons I left to go to Uber actually is because we would advise our customers on how to change their portfolios. And it would be a very high touch process. So I got involved with the quantitative research team and the analytics team, trying to design this platform to like dynamically change their allocations without needing to talk to them. Of course, a lot of the value is in the client interaction, but I thought this was a great way to like, to change the interaction. And so it was there where I saw like the value of data, especially when it touches like real people. And so I went to Uber, and then there was that whole story of like when COVID happened, the grocery delivery team got started. I jumped on that opportunity. That was the first thing I wanted to do, to stand up the grocery delivery platform, especially at these grocery stores. And so when I look back on it, whenever I've worked at like big companies, but whenever there was an opportunity to do something entrepreneurial, that was the most exciting thing for me.
Yeah.
And so I think around the time of Uber, especially given like how entrepreneurial Uber was, that's when I realized that I probably would want to do a startup in the future.
Yeah. So I guess it was in your DNA a
Yeah.
little bit. But if you weren't in tech, what would you be doing?
If I weren't in tech, I would probably be day trading at home and
Okay.
scrolling Twitter. Yeah.
Okay. Working for yourself. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I
Okay.
guess so.
Fair. How do you like to unwind?
Yeah. I think I like to just go to sleep because the next day there's something you can do about your problems. And when you go to sleep, your problems disappear. But I also like to exercise. I go biking along the Embarcadero. It's really beautiful out in SF. Picked up swimming recently. I've signed myself up for a triathlon.
Wow. It's amazing. Very SF.
Very SF, yeah.
And then the last rapid fire question is, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
I think it's very generic, but it's just that like tomorrow is another day. Like nothing that happens to you will be that important in the long run, especially when you're building a company. Like stuff is going to happen, and it's better to not dwell on it too much and move on quickly.
That's good. That's a good one. All right. Well, on that note, thank you so much, Leon, for joining us today here in the Wharton SF campus. And good luck with your company.
Thank you for having me.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.